When we think of Bhagat Singh, we usually picture the revolutionary, the martyr. But in his final days, right before he was sent to the gallows, he wrote something that showed us a completely different side of him, the philosopher. So today, we're going to dive deep into his incredible essay, Why I Am an Atheist, and use his own words to really get to the heart of his final, powerful argument.
Okay, let's just stop and think about this for a second, because it's a huge question. In the last moments of your life, most people turn to faith for comfort, right? But Bhagat Singh, he did the exact opposite. With his own death sentence just around the corner, he decided to look God in the eyes, so to speak, and say no. Why? What on earth could bring a man to that place at that terrifying moment?
Well, for his friends, even his fellow revolutionaries, the answer felt pretty simple. All that fame he'd gotten during the trials, it must have gone to his head. They figured his atheism wasn't some deep philosophical stance. Nope, it was just vanity, an arrogance so big that he started to see himself as a rival to God.
But here's the thing. Bhagat Singh knew exactly what they were saying about him. And in his essay, he tackles that accusation head-on. He actually frames his entire argument around this very question, using it as a springboard to tear down not just the charge against him, but the very foundations of religious belief itself.
So first things first, he goes right after this idea of ego. He starts by making this really sharp distinction. He says, look, I have pride, sure, but he separates ahankar, or what we'd call ego, which is an unjustified kind of pride, from self-respect, which he sees as a justified pride you earn from your own reasoned beliefs. One makes you want to compete with God, the other makes you question, well, everything.
And his logic here is just brilliant. He argues that a truly vain person, a real egomaniac, wouldn't deny God's existence. Why would they? They'd set themselves up as a competitor to God, or maybe even go all out and declare that they are God. See, in both cases, you're still believing in a higher power. A true atheist, he says, is playing a completely different game.
Okay, so if it wasn't ego, then what was it? Where did this atheism come from? Well, he answers that by laying out his own personal timeline to show this wasn't some sudden decision, but a long, thoughtful journey.
And this is the key point. He completely dismisses the idea that his atheism was some new thing that popped up with his fame. He's very clear he stopped believing in God long before anyone knew his name, back when he was just some kid. This is his direct takedown of the argument that his celebrity made him do it.
He basically maps out his whole evolution for us. He started out as a devout kid, chanting mantras for hours. Then college came, and he started questioning things, but he still kept his faith. The real change happened when he just dove into reading. Thinkers like Bakunin and Marx, guys whose ideas would really shape his worldview. By 1926, his mind was made up. He was an atheist. And a year later, that belief got put to the test when he was arrested and absolutely refused to pray, no matter the pressure. This wasn't a phase, it was a conviction, built over time.
So after defending his own journey, Singh goes on the attack. He shifts from explaining his atheism to questioning the whole logic of a creator God. And this, right here, is the philosophical core of his entire essay.
He asks a classic philosophical question, but he asks it with this raw, urgent energy. If you believe God is all-powerful and all-good, then you have to answer a really basic question. Why would he create a world that looks like this one?
And man, he does not pull any punches in his description. He sees the world as just this place of constant, unending chains of misery. It's a place where, as he puts it, not a single person is fully satisfied. To him, that reality just doesn't line up with the idea of a kind, loving creator. Not even close.
And this is where his argument gets razor sharp. He says, you've got two choices. Either God is limited by certain laws of nature, and if that's the case, he's not all-powerful, or this whole world of suffering is just his divine game, his leela, his amusement. And if that's true, Singh asks, how is he any different from the Roman tyrant Nero, who famously played his fiddle while Rome burned? It's a brutal comparison.
He also has no time for the idea that, suffer now, get rewarded in the afterlife. He sees that logic as completely bankrupt, morally speaking. He asks, how can you justify a man who injures you only so he can come back later to put a soothing ointment on the wound? The first act of cruelty, he argues, is still cruel. It's never justified.
Now, from this deep philosophical place, Singh pivots to a really sharp social and political critique. He starts to ask a very important question. Who actually benefits from these religious explanations for why we suffer?
So he zooms in on a really specific idea, reincarnation. The belief that your suffering in this life is basically punishment for bad things you did in a past life. Now, this is a pretty powerful way to explain inequality, but Singh is about to flip it completely on its head. His conclusion is totally radical. He says these ideas aren't divine truth at all. They're man-made inventions. And more than that, they were invented by the powerful, the privileged classes, as a way to justify their own high position and to keep everyone else from questioning the system. He breaks down exactly how this doctrine creates a vicious cycle. It starts the moment you're born. A child born into poverty is told it's their soul's fault. That poverty means no education, no opportunities. Society treats them with contempt, which of course makes them resentful. Then, if they eventually commit a crime out of pure desperation, the system just points its finger and says, "See, we told you, they're a sinner." It's a perfect, self-fulfilling trap. So for him, the biggest sin isn't something you did in a past life. The biggest sin is poverty itself. He calls it a punishment that literally forces people to commit more sins, trapping them completely. He totally reframes sin, not as a personal failure, but as a failure of society. And all of this brings us to his conclusion. After all the philosophy, all the arguments, he comes back to his own situation, facing death, with no comfort from God.
He paints this incredibly stark picture. The believer, he says, can hope for a better life next time around, right? To be reborn a king or to go to paradise. But the atheist, they don't have that. For them, death isn't a transition. It is, quite simply, the full stop, the final moment. That's it.
But here's the thing. In the face of that absolute end, that's where he finds his courage. He fully accepts that the moment of his execution is it, the end of the story. There's no sequel. And because of that, the only thing left that matters is how he meets that end. He finds his meaning, not in some future reward, but in the integrity of the moment itself, dying for his cause with his head held high. And this is exactly why, when a friend begged him to pray in his last days, he refused. He says it so plainly. For selfish reasons, I am not going to pray. To him, praying at the very end would have been a humiliating defeat. It would have been an act that cheapened and insulted the very struggle he had given his entire life to.
And so he leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought. He comes full circle, back to that original accusation of vanity, and he just throws it right back at us. If holding on to your convictions, even when you're facing total annihilation, is vanity, then fine. He'll stand for it. And he just leaves that question hanging there, forcing you to decide for yourself. Is this the ultimate act of ego, or is it the ultimate act of courage?